What's up, guys? Welcome to this Friday recap. We had a really interesting chat today over three main areas. The first one was we talked about property in Australia. James just came back from a weekend, 3-day weekend, in a room full of hundreds and hundreds of property investors here in Australia. He talked about what was spoken about, where we're going in that area in their view, and it was really, really interesting. The second thing we talked about was I put to each of the guys on the panel, if you had $1 million right now to invest, where would you invest it and why? Would you put it into crypto? Would you put it into stocks? Would you put it into real estate? What exactly would you do with that money? And the last thing we talked about is I had a heap of questions about Cyprus when I announced last week that I am moving to Cyprus in 4 months from now. And so I talked about why I'm moving to Cyprus, tax rates, all sorts of stuff that you might want to know, how much it costs, why I went there, and everything else. So, and that sort of morphed into a discussion about happiness in life and optimizing your life for happiness longer term. So it was really interesting. I think you'll like it. If you like it, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Bye for now. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Unemployable. It is the Friday recap with your friends, Eric, Mark, James, and of course, myself. Welcome to the panel, guys. Great to be here. How you all doing, Mark? What's going on?
Mate, I'm doing well. How about you? How are you doing this morning?
Mate, I'm good. I just got back from New Zealand, as you know, thanks to partly all of you guys. Bought me a lovely ticket to go see Coldplay over at Eden Park in New Zealand. I have not seen Coldplay before, and it was unbelievable. It was, if you have not seen Coldplay, anybody listening to this and you want to see, I've seen AC/DC, Michael Jackson, I've seen Eagles, Billy Joel. This was the best concert I've ever seen.
Wow.
You see, my birthday's on the 15th of January.
I think they're going home by then.
Business class tickets, good too. I'm cool.
Got to invite us to your birthday first, Jace.
It was epic, and it was great to be back in New Zealand. New Zealand's one of my favourite countries in the world. Stayed down at the new development Britomart. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's right downtown, and it's just this sort of little creative precinct and renovated, beautiful boutique hotel there. And it was awesome. So
It looks so picturesque. Every time I see your New Zealand updates, I'm like, I cannot believe that I just recently went through the Auckland airport, but I haven't been to New Zealand. It's so close.
It's beautiful. It's
have to go.
It's God's country.
Yeah.
Wow. I went over to Waiheke on Sunday for our early anniversary celebration, which was beautiful, and had a great time. But no, everything's really good. Getting ready for the end of the year. Everyone's been busy. Eric, you've been busy building your new house. For those who follow Eric on socials,
that's not I'm kind of
Dolce & Gabbana taps. And
Adam's been hearing some of my conversations, secondhand, and he was just like, I'm like dealing with the skylights and the skylight size and just this selection and that selection. You hire, an architect, and you hire a interior designer and the rest of it, but there's still things that come up, and it's just like next thing you know, you're spending 3 hours because the skylight doesn't fit that way and it goes against the trusses. No, you can't do it this way. I'm just like, oh man, you just pull your hair out with some of this stuff.
Got some panels going in there as well, man?
Yeah, some safe rooms.
Yeah. It's a full-on project. Building your own home is a full-on project, right?
Yes. The owner building it.
No, we got a builder. A good mate of mine's building it, Tony. Really good guy. Builds a lot of luxury properties here on the Gold Coast. And but it's still a process, like there's always little things that an architect draws
that doesn't work.
It actually can't be built.
Yeah.
And then when you go there and you stand, I'm standing on the second level and I'm like, oh wow, look, the river actually opens up massively on the left-hand side on the master bedroom, but there's no window there. So now it's like, we need to put a window there. So now it's like, okay, but what kind of window? Is it a floor-to-ceiling window? Is it a horizontal window? Is it vertical? All these things that just come up, and sometimes you got to make these decisions on the fly. But it's good. It's learning.
The amount of things that architects draw that don't actually work in when the builder goes to build it is astonishing as well.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of property, let's kick off today's pod there, because there's before we do, what's the black 8-ball thing here? What is this?
It's Magic 8-Ball. So I don't know, as a 40-year-old growing,
how much are we talking? Good. I did have a misspent youth.
It's not your 8-ball.
Yeah, and it's usually not black.
If you grew up around about Eric's or my age, you're our age too, aren't you? Adam, I'm not sure if you had the Magic 8-Ball, but this was like a staple toy of our era. It's funny because there was a shop in Saratoga, New York that had all these trinkets of that around about that time. So I bought a couple. And then today I saw on or X or yesterday, Elon posts, who do you trust more to make decisions about interest rates, the Fed or a magic 8-ball? And it was like 85% people voted for the magic 8-ball.
Okay.
So I just thought I'd bring it in based on that. And if there's any important questions that we need to ask, we'll go to the magic 8-ball.
Okay. What is it? Like, what is a
Oh, so you ask a question, right? Like, so
Are you asking?
is James overheating in the podcast studio? Ask again later, and it'll give you a response. But before I asked, and it said you may rely on it. So
Okay, there you go. Well, we'll ask the Magic 8-ball. I want to start on property because on the pod, we talk about property often. We talk about crypto sometimes. We talk about business a lot. But James, you just came back, or you spent your weekend watching a 3-day property event specifically from Australia here in Melbourne. What were the high-level takeaways from that event? What was the context and the high-level takeaways?
Yeah, look, it was they have an annual event, and the lady's name's Dimpa Bohol. I love real estate. She's been in the sector for educating people for
long time.
I think it's they're coming up 18 years now, so they've stood the test of time, and a fairly legitimate source of information. I've got quite a few mates who are quite successful still in that community as well. Shannon and Carson in that community. I think they attended the event live. I streamed in, obviously via Zoom. But no, it was good. So the event itself is more of a celebration of the success stories that have come out of the community, and it wasn't just all the people who had knocked it out of the park. It was really interesting to see diverse backgrounds, diverse strategies. It wasn't just all about property development.
Just for the listeners, that community is mum and dad investors, right? It's not corporates and institutions. It's everyday people learning to become real estate investors, maybe developers.
Yeah, exactly. More so, she talks about chunk deals, like how to generate your first chunk of equity to then go and build a cash flow portfolio. So it is the springboard into property investment for a newbie. But in that community too, we've got some friends in there that I've got some friends in there, men that are like killing it with real estate as well. You got some really high net worths in there as well. So you got those sleepers in there that you're have sort of meet when you put your hand out and network with them. And they weren't the ones that were being celebrated for a specific reason. It was to show people that everyday mum and dad, semi-retirees, retired single mums, put together amass these decent property portfolios. So it was really good to see from that perspective.
What were the hot takes for the people looking for the high level notes?
Just on that as well, James, is Dimpa Bohol, is she the one that advocates the property wagon wheel? You buy like 2 or 3 positive cash flow properties, and then you put those.
I couldn't tell you. There's from what I understand, there's a smorgasbord of every single property strategy there is. Right. Carson and Shannon were referring to in that property day as well. And it's like, what do I resonate with? Where I'm at in my wealth creation journey. Yep. And you might want to then go deep on one topic specifically. But so this was a celebration of everything they've done it from a reno and flip through to rooming houses, through to turning up granny flats. So it was just a really good spreadable and development, 4 townies or 20 blocks or whatever. So it wasn't just purely about who made the most money. It was just, all different walks of life. So it was good. But the headline stuff that I sort of got the main that I zeroed it on was a guy, and I can't pronounce his last name. He's from the demographics group. So his business partner is Bernard Salt. He's quite a decorated demographer nationwide and quite accurate from my understanding. So his business partner, Simon Kristenmacher, is German. He did a session on the Friday. And I'd urge anyone to go to YouTube, because I just found him online there now. He's one hell of a funny guy, and he makes. They even introduced him as the guy that makes data fun. And it was a really interesting conversation, and just where it talks about the demographic changes, the boomers all.
What's his name again? How do you spell his name?
Simon, and he might put this up in post. It's Simon Keustenmacher. So Kristenmacher.
You can be forgiven for not getting that one right.
Yeah. I'll look, I did my best, Anyway, so but look, it goes through all the birth rate, where we're headed in the next couple of years. In the high, I think the Gen R. Well, I'm a Gen X. It was the Gen Ys. The birth rate was quite high through that sector, and how that's going to push on over the years. Anyway, I won't break down that because I can't remember it all off by heart. But in short. Demographically, we're screwed. So migration is going to be the key to keeping this country afloat. And then that parlayed into Dimphna's state of the address. She called it the State of the Nation. She did it on the Sunday, And that's a lot of people tune into that because she's not usually wrong because she's an economist herself.
When you say demographically we're screwed, like what does that mean? Like if we don't import people,
Correct.
we can't pay our bills. Is
Well,
that correct?
primarily it means that the birth rate is collapsing.
Correct.
Beyond replacement of
So organically,
human
we're basically
resources.
not growing organically, so we need to start bringing people in.
And the issue that has is if your workforce is declining, then your GDP is declining. Effectively, we're getting poorer.
Yeah, exactly. And also, when you've got an aging population, the people to then look after, most natural-born Aussies are not wanting to do the lower level work, so we have to employ them in there. That also went over into construction as well.
Well, that's true. I mean, when you go out to a cafe or a restaurant in Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, even the Gold Coast now, try to count the number of natural-born Australians that are serving you.
Yeah.
It's almost zero.
You pick, and also healthcare, aged care, all those sort of sectors as well.
Mm-hmm. I was in hospital the other week, and it was all Filipino, Asian, Indian people looking after me.
Yep.
And so while people sometimes sort of bitch and complain about immigration, at the same time, these people are adding real value to the economy.
Yeah, and so then, so that was, and again, I won't sit too much on Simon's session, but if you just go to YouTube and Google the demographics group or Burn the Salt or Simon Wicks.
So the bottom line is that there's more and more people coming into the country, which is going to keep demand high.
We need them coming to the country.
Can we because immigration is a very nuanced topic. We could spend a whole 6 podcasts on it. But what was your takeaway as to what they were forecasting immigration projections would do to Australian property markets?
Oh, only one way. Right. Except for then that's where Dimster, he was just did the demographic piece, and I said Dimster went into the more how's it going to affect the property market, because that's what all the people in the audience want to hear is where am I going to make money and how am I going to make money. So
I was listening to Peter Thiel on a podcast today, and he says it's something like for a 10% increase in a population for a state or a suburb, it correlates to something like a 50% increase in property prices.
Yeah,
and this is why the conversation is becoming such a dynamic one.
And she believes until 2029 there'll be about 400,000 people coming in a year. Don't quote me, or something like that. And we're under building by about let's say we need 200,000 houses a year. We're doing about 80 or 100,000 houses a year. And not only that, the big alarm. Don't get me, those numbers aren't right, but it was alarming. But she said not only that, they're under building. There's not enough. How you forecast even one step further is the applications in council. They're not there because the building costs and construction costs that developers can't make it work because of red tape. And something like 50 or 60% of a house is tax. So a lot of stuff needs to change to be able to get these people into the country and then house them somewhere. So, look, overall, she said the future's pretty bright for Australia, and also one other alarming piece that a positive piece I took away from it is that, if you look at the 18.6-year property clock, look at the GFC, it was 2008, 4 years down, 14 up with a break in the middle. So 2026, US is about to shit itself again. In other words, another GFC, but bigger because there's more money in the system. But she said, if you look at Australia, the RBA won't allow it. You look at home ownership rates and whatnot. We won't have that crash like we didn't have it last time. The RBA is a government organisation. The Fed is a private organisation. Our cycles do not replicate the US. Yes, we will have a slowdown of sorts. And this is just the headline stuff. And as you said, we can go to the nuances of it all. But overall, she just said, look, the Australian property market's going to remain solid purely on these facts about the immigration that's required. She said, and Victoria and New South Wales will be the beneficiaries mainly of this migration, with some southeast or Queensland, and specifically southeast Queensland coming in. If you're going to split up the pie, where the pressure is going to come on this housing market. So that was interesting to look at. But also, there are sectors within the sectors. Obviously, in inner city apartments in Melbourne, there'll be a massive oversupply, and people are getting their ass burnt as we speak about that. So. That was the pretty much a decent takeaway, and more so, like, obviously the affordable housing end of the market will be the one.
It begs the question, doesn't it? Because, like, we've had, I looked this up last week for a webinar I did, and Queensland has had 63% capital growth since 2020. Sydney and Melbourne not far behind. So how much further can prices go when you've got lower income immigrants coming in and still have affordability where they can buy?
It's interesting what James was saying in relation to the US and their property cycles or their financial meltdowns or downturns. I mean, if you do the research into this, the way that Australia has been able to escape having any recessions for 20 or 30 years is been through immigration. And if you look at, like you said, a lot of the jobs are in construction. And so it's through construction, but it's also through increased wealth effects through property, etc. So they've actually escaped or artificially blocked recessions through immigration.
And mining probably as well, partly through resources.
Well, mining is boom bust, right? Because mining is boom bust depending on the commodity cycle. When commodity prices drop, the mining sector drops.
So do you have a view on what these tariffs might impact Australia indirectly as a result of Chinese goods being affected? You know, all the stuff that
in the US.
Yeah, in the US. Well, the raw materials coming from Australia for certain goods. No,
Macro market probably take that.
I mean, I don't specifically have a view on how the tariffs are going to affect Australia in the short term. I haven't really looked into that. I do think though that Australia, in many respects, is in a very similar situation geographically to the US. They're very resource rich. And it could be within our best interest to stop exporting so much of our natural resources overseas and starting to develop that stuff here, and that could bring prices down. So
here's a question for you, changing gears quickly, just off specifically property. So the headline there, James, is we have net migration into this beautiful country. Harry Dent's going to remain wrong for even longer.
Unless things change politically, right? Because as you're seeing, migration or immigration is becoming a huge issue around the world for different reasons. In the US, it's for economic reasons. In Europe, it's cultural reasons. It's destroying the fabric of the culture. I think Australia is kind of in the balance at the moment. I don't know, macro mark you say, but I don't actually know which way Australia is going to tip with relation to immigration.
So you're saying if there is a political pressure on immigration, that's another...
Or they may slow it. I mean, look, the reality is we need immigration to survive. Like James is saying, birth rates are declining, and that's probably the biggest existential threat that we face as a civilization, declining birth rates.
As Australia is... I mean, the whole country is a result of immigration.
We need it, and we just need to. And I think we've done it pretty well compared to most countries in the world. Our skilled immigration has been probably one of the best at bringing people in.
I just want to mention a couple things with immigration. If there's not many people that are coming out of school, right, and going, "Hey, I want to be a tradie," that's diminishing. A lot of people are coming out of school and they want to work online and they want to be influencers and they want to be YouTubers and, content creators and these types of things. In Australia, we have a massive problem. And I'm going to give you an example. In 2017, 2018, we built a development, right? It was 51 units, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms in Southport. My contract build price was $275,000 a unit. Build price, finished product, here's your keys. Mm. That same building today, on average, is $800,000. Mm-hmm. Build price, right? So you're talking within 6 years, mm-hmm. right? 2.5 times.
This is the real inflation.
Right? This is the real inflation. The issue is we don't have the labor.
And materials have gone up.
Materials have gone up, but labor has gone up more. It's a supply and demand problem in the labor sector. And what's happening is you got Dubai as an example. I just pulled up some numbers. They've launched 90,000 homes in 2024, right? Well, we got to remember, Dubai's population is about 3.5 million. Australia's 25 million, right? And we're not even putting out 80,000 homes a year across the entire country. Mm-hmm. How does Dubai build that amount? How can they build purge? Cheap labor, right? They import cheap labor. That is the reason why they can build, and you can go and buy 1-bedroom units there and 2-bedroom units there for 250 grand Aussie, 300 grand, 400 grand Aussie. You will never see that ever again here because a lot of my friends, they're in trades. the trades are the new lawyers. The trades are the new doctors. They're getting paid big money and they're heavily protected. And I'm not against that. Or I'm not saying that we have to import cheap labor. But the reality is, if that's what they're going to get paid and that's what things cost, property prices will be affected by that. Like now, that 275 unit that we built, we were selling them for 500 grand.
Yeah.
Do you know what one just recently sold for in the same building? 1.1 million. You're talking about a 2-bedroom unit in Southport. And this is, to me, one of the main issues that we have in this country, and we'll have to solve that.
But we're not going to get cheap labour here because we've got fair work fucking us up.
You can't do it. Like, you go to Dubai and you see the big open buses of the immigrants there, and they don't get treated great.
It's confronting, right? Like, I'm not saying it's the right or wrong thing to do.
Yeah, I guess
But that's the reality of the world.
The point is for the people watching is, what can we do with this information and how can we benefit from it?
Yeah.
And, increase property prices in Australia, whether you agree with it or not, because, the main person on the street that you speak, if you interviewed the people on the street and you said, should we do something to drop property prices? Most people would say, yes, we should. But the reality is it's probably not happening soon.
Yeah, that's a really politically hot potato, right? Like as well. And to just being the influence of the tradies and the unions, that CBUS story that's developing is fascinating at the moment with the CBUS superannuation and how they've had CFMEU officials on the board of a super fund that has $100 billion in assets under management.
Wow.
And they struggled to repay. I think the story is $20 million. They've been not refunding death benefits and different things to families. It's just a developing story, but that shows you the influence of the unions when they're sitting on the boards of superannuation funds that in Australia it's a $3 trillion industry.
Yeah.
And when you think, you think about access to the superannuation funds when you're a CFMEU.
And a lot of these bigger buildings, right? I think just won't get off the ground because you can't make them stack up.
Yeah.
Right? So it's going to be the smaller boutique buildings that will go because you can be controlled under like a builder developer. But if you're a developer and you're trying to subcontract a tier 1 builder to build your 250 unit development, unless people are going to be paying $2 million for a 2-bedroom unit.
And another thing as well is, like James said, in Melbourne, you're going to have this issue with apartments. Gold Coast is a pretty good market because there's so many people that are trying to get into the Gold Coast market, and because rents are so high, the property prices can continue to rise. But what I'm seeing, the big shift that I'm seeing is that when I first started selling land 15 years ago, you could buy a block of land, build a house on it, and you could sell the spec property brand new, and you could make 50 to 100 grand profit. And the reason that you could do that is because there was a gap between what established was selling for and what the new home was selling for. The new home was cheaper to buy the land and build. And so you could make that arbitrage. Now, because land prices have appreciated so much and build prices have gone up as well, that arbitrage is closed. And so more and more people, I think, are looking at fixer-upper homes or homes where they can get someone in and renovate because it's cheaper to renovate than build. And so that's going to put pressure into these areas as well. And it's just a vicious cycle.
And don't forget when you're doing house and land packs as well, because we did a shitload of them, is that more often than not that 50 grand now is paid in marketing fees. So you get the 50 grand's there, it's just someone else is taking it before the end user's getting it. So that's where the 50 G's is, and that's one of the strategies that vehemently despise is off the plan because the market take the slice out of it. Usually
that's a lot.
I used to like that as well.
We've got mates in the industry. I was in that industry, and that's where the money goes. And now the comms are even going up, which drives the price up inherently as well. Like, I mean, just talking about prices, when I was project marketing, we did our own stuff, and we had I'm still on some property aggregator lists, like shitholes in Marsden, Kingston, for a 450 metre block, 4-bed, 2-bar, 2-car, 180 metres. Twin ducted air. They were around about 360, 370 grand. I'm on the list now. They're fucking 800 grand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how does that work? Well, then you look at the rental market as well. It's just
and this comes back to the real inflation in Australia.
Yeah, that is the point. That is the real inflation that we're facing. It's property prices. It's the cost of eggs or the cost of bread, while it's probably gone up 4x as well, it's not enough to break the bank.
And it's,
Whereas property prices,
Rent if you're
rent and property
not
prices.
so the mortgage.
but it's the quality of lifestyle that will change, right? People will come in with the money, and people without the money will have to go and move somewhere else. And the perfect example of this is a neighbor of mine. He's been renting for a few years, just down the road from us, and he was paying $1,000 a week, and he was there for a few years. Really nice guy. He's got a solid job. The girlfriend's got a solid job. They then upped his rent to $1,500. And gave him the option. It's now $1,500. You want to stay or not? And he didn't stay. And he now moved to Hope Island. So imagine being, a mid-30s single couple living in Mermaid, right in the hustle and bustle of it all, near Broad Beach and Burleigh. And now you've moved to Hope Island because the $1,000 a week gives you a bigger house, but you're in Hope Island. And that is the reality. And then the new neighbors that have moved in, right? I meet them. Two guys, right? One guy is a data scientist for the government. The other guy is a fly-in, fly-out mining worker, and they're splitting it, right? So they'll be paying $750, each as an example, and they're on their way. But the reality is, unfortunately, the people that were there before, his lifestyle will now change dramatically, and they'll be making different decisions every day because they're now living in an area where there's not a lot to do when you're in your mid-30s. Hope Island's a beautiful place.
I think it's interesting to remember, it's hard to imagine that prices keep going, but then I'm reminded on the weekend, I posted on my Instagram because we're spending 3 months we thought we were spending 3 months in New York next year, July. So we're going to be there for August, September, October, right? Nice time of year in New York City. And we were there at Waiheke Island looking through, right, over lunch, let's try and find a pad. And we've put our filtered search on booking.com, Airbnb. I said, all right, the budget is $5,000 a week, $20,000 a month, right? Aussie. Could not find anything in the area. We wanted to be in Tribeca, a 2-bedroom. So we've got some friends that want to come. There's a spare bedroom, plus we use it for extra storage over there. For something that we would want to live in, and I'm not talking fancy like what I live in now. I'm just talking like a normal 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, furnished in Tribeca. We realistically need a budget of $80,000 to $100,000. That's for a small, I'm talking 600 square feet, small, tiny.
200 meters. Yeah.
No, well under 80.
No,
70.
We had a studio. Dom, Frankie, and I spent 2 nights in New York, and one of the nights we were like, we'll just get something cheaper, and we got a studio with a bed that folds down out of the wall, right. And I think we were paying $800 a night.
Yeah. Well, what were some of the prices though?
Like the one that we liked in Tribeca was, we worked it out, I think it's 120 square meters, and it was 2 bedrooms, and it was $126,000 for 90 days.
Mate, I saw a Porsche that's probably sitting in the ashtray. So I just go and get your fucking keys out and just phone you up.
No, but I mean,
so basically,
it's
that's over $40,000 a month.
It's $10,000.
It's double.
$10,000.
Double than what you.
Now, to be fair, there's
the studio is nearly $30,000 a month.
To be fair, that's the exchange rate's probably killing us quite badly there at 66 cents, right? But still, it just shows you, when you look at these big international cities, there's still a long way potentially to run. And there was very little there. There was almost nothing available. It's crazy.
So where in Pennsylvania are you staying? Little zombies.
Exactly. There's just competition for that level. It just shows you how much money's swimming around. So here's a segue in the pod. I want to ask you guys a question, and I think the audience will be interested in your answers. If you had $1 million right now, there's a lot of listeners who are sitting in $1 million home that they're sitting there, they own their home, and it's growing at 7% a year. The long-term average in Australia for Australian real estate over 30 years is 7.3 or 7.4% compounding. So, they're sitting on this $1 million. It's just keeping up with inflation, probably not the real inflation, but just keeping up with inflation. They feel like they're getting rich, but they're not. If you were to sell that and you were to go and put it into something, what would you do? Now, I want to preface this. This is not financial advice. I just want to understand your collective thinking on what you would do and why.
Eric, pre-pod, has a little bird going to drop on him a couple of dollars in. So, let's go to Eric, because he's actually
Eric. What would you do?
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, because Eric's got facing this problem very shortly.
But you're a family, so you're coming up and you're trying. You're already rich, but let's say you're coming up and you could get your hands on $1 million.
Let's ask the rich wanker first. Yeah. So I think
Do you know what
depending on your situation, right? So if you're coming up and you're working in a job, as an example, and you don't really like your job, and you've come into $1 million, and like there's multiple, right?
I think people want to.
There's multiple factors.
People want to know what you would do.
What I would do is I would either invest in property, because that's what I know, and what I like about property is you can manufacture growth, right? Very hard to manufacture growth in other areas unless you're doing the education like Mark and Adam and whatnot, putting 1,000 hours educating themselves on, stocks and Bitcoin and the rest of it. But what I would be doing is looking for good jockeys and very good business ideas to invest that will create cash flow and serviceability to then invest in real estate, depending on the situation that you're in.
So would you invest in business or real estate or both?
So if you already had a bit of money, so if you have a business already and it's doing all right and you had $1 million, I would be investing either it back into your business in more stock for growth or investing it into property. If I had $1 million today in my situation, I'd just be investing it into property myself and manufacturing growth. That's a percentage of it I'd probably take in myself, put into crypto, because that's what I'm actually doing now, just based off being influenced by you guys and the education, and just again being in proximity to people that are doing some things around it. But that's what I would be doing, and I would probably take a portion of it and put it back into educating yourself at the same time. So take a percentage of that and educate, whether that's joining a property program, whether that's joining a coaching program or a high-end coaching program. A business partner of mine just told me that he's doing coaching with PBD's crew overseas, and that is not cheap. So I would definitely a portion of it in education. And if you have a business already that you think can be growing more, I'd be funding it back into your business. If you have a business that's already killing it, I'd be putting it into property.
Yeah, I was about to say pretty much the same way, just in a different order. If somebody listens to the pod, I'd be going out and getting it in an education in property. Definitely go and spend 5-10 grand, enjoy high net worth with a 30 grand for the platinum. Then you're again around proximity to people that are killing it. And within those groups are people with a shitload of cash, idea, execution, capital. I know for a fact in the groups like Dimpners and whatnot, and it could be Roltons as well, who knows. But there's people with money in those groups. So it's your ticket, it's your key to freedom through unlimited, infinite amount of money. So I'd go and do that course first. I'd look at, depending on what your position is with property, is working out to do doubles, 500 grand into a development site, so you can double from that, and sailor, tits up on all in on Bitcoin. If you've got conviction, that comes down to education again. So it'd come back down to proximity.
So you would be a small scale developer.
If you've never developed before, where you can double your money.
When I say develop, I mean just getting a house and that's on a big block and splitting. Not being a big time, just adding value.
4-pack, 6-pack of townies, buying an old shitter somewhere, and
just proactively add
use
value.
property to try and make
exactly forcing value.
You can build you can hand on heart, if you had a little bit of education around it, you could do one duplex a year, right, and make between $300,000 to $500,000 on a duplex
on $1 million,
right?
You'd have to have an investment.
But you have to have the serviceability or access. You have to have access to a money or a funding partner or something like that. But there's money there right now. Every house that you see, every corner that you see, you drive around Burley, you drive around Mermaid, you drive around Palm Beach, anywhere, Southport, right? What's that? Right? There's
Don't tell everybody.
houses being built. There's duplexes being built. There's townhouses being built. There's small scale developments being built. And let me tell you, not all of them are professional builder developers.
No, but again, to get back to that money piece and the serviceability, if you're in a network with high net worth in there, you're borrowing their serviceability.
Correct.
Just go and do two sites. You could potentially do it with no money down, like what we're doing.
I think that's really like what Shannon and Carson showed us on that property day, of like having no money, but having the strategy and the skills is a super way to make
And again, assuming that you've got a job or a business that has income, let's just take that off the table. Is what would you do with $1 million? That's what I would do with it, assuming I had income.
What would you do, Mark?
Well, I how specific do you want me to be? So back in 2019, 2020, I had a similar dilemma, and I would say that I probably put the majority of $1 million into my business, into stock, into my ecom business, and into my education. So I probably put about 300K, 250 into education, and the rest I put 800 grand. I put into my e-commerce business to try and bootstrap that. So that was 2029. That was after quitting my job and going into business. That was 2019, 2020. But recently, I've had the same practical situation or dilemma to where to put money. And I want to preface this by saying the first thing. So recently, I sold all my residential investment properties. So outer suburbs of Melbourne, I had about 14 properties, sold them all, and I had a lump sum of cash, probably a bit more than $1 million. But basically, what I did is I bought a house in Elwood, Melbourne, that I can add value to. It's 3 apartments. I'm going to add value to it. I'm going to make some money on that. And I bought a place in Suffolk Park that I think I can also add value to. I've already been offered 500 more than what I paid.
That's Byron Bay for those who don't know.
Byron Bay. So that was my first move. And then I took basically $1 million and I invested 50% of that into crypto, 250,000 of that, so 25% of that into an options portfolio. So I'm trading options. And the other 250,000 I bought shares. So I bought Tesla stock, MicroStrategy, Intel, and that's what I'm doing with $1 million right now. And I think if you gave me $1 million, you gave me another $1 million, you said, Mark, here's $1 million of my money, invest it, then that's probably where I'd go. I'd go into crypto, tech mainly, so tech companies with relation to stocks, and options trading, because I think that's the best expression of how to trade markets.
With the education piece, you said you spent $250K in education, and learnings. With what you've learned since 2019, 2020, and coming into buying these stocks because you've been educating yourself, what's one piece of advice, or what's one tool, or what's one website that you can tell someone to look at to kind of educate themselves in what you're investing in?
So it's an amazing question, and it's nuanced. But what I would say is that the very best in the industry, the people that I would love to sit down and just be able to pick their brains, are sensational in 2 areas. They're able to zoom all the way out and have a really, really wide macro view and understand how all parts of the puzzle fit together. And they're really, really good in the pocket. So that's like trading day to day, week to week, understanding the dynamics of the market and why sometimes flows matter more than the fundamentals. And so the best in the business can zoom all the way out and all the way in.
Who are the best in the business that you talk about?
Yeah, well, that's
Is there a YouTube channel?
Yeah,
And also,
there are some people.
A part of that $1 million, would you allocate some to get some one-on-one with these guys?
Absolutely. There's 3 people. There's 2 people that I'd never miss anything that they release. The first one is Jim Carson. It's spelled CEM. Carson, I think, is with a C or with a K. Or I can pop it up. He's got a Twitter, and he's got a company called Kai Volatility, and he's he's amazing at on his there's heaps of free podcasts with Sam Carson, and he explains the macro, why we're in the situation that we're in, and what that means in the long term, but also what it means in the short term because of the way that flows are coming into the market with options. Because there's this thought out there that the options is the tail wagging the dog, but really it's the other way around. The options is the dog, not the stock prices. The options is everything at the moment in the way that money moves within markets. Derivatives.
That's a whole 100 hours of learning just to understand what you just...
That's taken me since 2018 to get to the point now where I'm getting into the pocket.
What you're really...
First, I started with the macro and understanding how everything fits together.
But you're just saying the options market is so much bigger than the...
It's way bigger.
Because of the leverage involved.
Because of the
leverage. People have got the coin and got the inside, or not, I'll call it knowledge are going, we're going to make a shitload more here than buying the actual stock itself. So we're going to go hard on the options market.
It's there's more money, like Adam said, there's more money moving around in options daily than there is in the spot price.
Who was the second person?
And then the second person who's just incredible on the topic of liquidity and how liquidity, so the flow of funds around the world between banks and private enterprise flows, is Michael Howe from Cross Border Capital. Sensational. So Chem Carson and Michael Howe, I don't miss anything that they release.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What was his business name? Michael House?
Michael Howe, Cross Border Capital.
I think for me to answer that question, I think one of my fundamental beliefs is education. So these days you could spend 250 grand or you can spend 250 hours on YouTube. Spending money isn't necessarily a guarantee of quality of education these days. That has all changed.
I spend less now than what I did previously.
Yeah, previously you had to pay a $100,000 platinum membership to Tony Robbins. Now you can actually sit down with people with 10 times Tony Robbins' net worth for free on YouTube. So,
hey guys, we recently ran a property day where we took people on the road in 2 buses and showed them 12 real estate deals. 4 of them were commercial and the rest were land subdivision deals around the Gold Coast and southern Brisbane. And this is the workbook. It's a 43-page workbook where we actually show you each and every deal, how much was paid for it, how the development was done, how much money was made, and so much more. And we've decided to give this away to anybody who's interested in this kind of thing. All you need to do is go to unemployable.com.au/2024, 2024. It'll give you an insight into what our coaching clients get when they join us in the program. It'll show you how millions of dollars were created through real estate deals right here in Australia just in the last few years. And you can get it for absolutely free. Go to unemployable.com.au/2024.
I think it starts with education, and what I've learned from becoming a full-on Bitcoiner, over many years is I think you should go and spend a couple hundred hours learning macro economics and spend at least a couple of hundred hours learning about Bitcoin. The thing I see about Australians is we are so in the weeds with property. The whole country is addicted to real estate. I was one of them. We watch interest rates, watch your house price. It's what we talk about over barbecues. It's what's on TV. It's because the banks and realestate.com.au and the government all together, we need property in this country. It's just like our national sport, which is great. But it's also, you got to be aware that you're in that reality. When I've gone down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, whether or not you end up buying Bitcoin, what it's really good for is understanding concepts that are so core about money, like counterparty risk. Like most people don't understand, like they can't imagine having $1 million, or what if you had $10 million? What if you had $100 million sitting in front of you right now? What would you do? What would you really do if you were charged with that responsibility? And when you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it helps you establish a different reality. So one thing to put it, like if you look at Bitcoin, for example, the first thing you'd have to do is take a view. Do you believe in it? Like yes or no? If you do believe in it, how deep is the conviction? And you shouldn't do anything unless your conviction's really deep. But when you look at Bitcoin, you go, okay, you got to then form a view, because it all comes down to how quickly you can grow the money. And so what you're looking for what I look for is a hurdle rate. And I assess everything I invest in now through the lens of Bitcoin. So I look at like about $1 million, go, okay, my view is it's not going to go to zero. This is me personally. I think it's going to keep growing. I think from a risk adjusted basis now, it's one of the best times ever. We've got, for the first time, pro crypto politicians in the White House. So you look at that and you go, okay, well, it's not going to go to zero. So what's it going to grow at? It's the last 5 years, it's 60%. All time, it's 160%. So what do you think it is going forward? It's diminishing. So let's say it's 30%. Let's say that's my view. Right? If I get that $1 million and I just buy Bitcoin and I just forget that I own it for 10 years, which if we're looking at a 10-year time view, if you work that out in a compound interest calculator, what do you think it's worth in 10 years? Just guess. The number is 13.7 million.
Wow.
So the 1 million
I was close.
So the 1 million turns to 13.7, and you haven't had to pay tax along the way because you haven't sold it yet, right? So you have this, and I haven't had to manage a tenant. I haven't had to take on debt. I haven't. So then you start to think about things like counterparty risk. So where's the counterparty risk? So I was thinking, I've got a big chunk of change coming shortly. You have as well. All right, should I go buy Warren Buffett shares, like just in Berkshire? Because that's been compounding for 60 years at 20 points. But then I go, okay, what's the counterparty risk? Well, first of all, Warren Buffett's 93 years old. Second of all, the world we live in today is not the world that he made that money in. Warren now has nearly $500 billion of Aussie dollars of cash. So when he was coming up, he didn't have that problem. Where do you actually invest $500 billion of cash today? Like, there's a very small universe of companies you can actually put that money into. It's not like back in the day when he had a much smaller cash pile when he was growing it. So there's counterparty risk there with Warren dying, the world being a different place. The quantum of money that he now has changed. All right, let's look at commercial real estate. Well, what's the counterparty risk? Is your tenant, Aussie president. So everything you look at from a return. So when I look at it, I go, am I better off if I believe I'm right? Because at the end of the day, it's making a bet, and no matter which way you go. I would look at James's idea and go, okay, if I get $1 million and I get in this community, I can turn the million into 1.6 million in a year and pay some tax. I'm left with 1.3. I made 30% return. That's great, right? Then I go again next year and I do the same thing, and I'd have to map that whole thing out and go, is that going to beat
Straight Bitcoin?
Straight Bitcoin. So what I would probably do is put it all in Bitcoin, go and learn, and then use other people's money and grow that through real estate.
As long as you can,
as
long as you can, your emotional intelligence is in check, right? Like we had a coaching call last night, and this is what I was saying to people is like, I think I might have mentioned in the last pod, you see the ups and downs every day. I look at my Bitcoin portfolio 5 times a day, and I probably will forever until I own it, right? And I don't have all right, and I don't have nowhere near the amount you would have in Bitcoin, as an example. So it's one of those things where your emotional intelligence needs to be in check. And it's like you said last week, I think, Mark, is, there's a lag in property. You don't know that it's gone down until 3 months after, right? When they send you a report saying on average, Australian house prices have gone down by 4%, as an example. So for me, it's one of those things. Even with stocks, it's the same thing. Is as long as your education that you put in and your conviction is so solid that you're not gonna sell. But as an example, I had a guy message me that I know really well after the webinar, and we were talking about Bitcoin, right? And he's like, it's a wild time. I had a heap of Bitcoin 3 years ago and sold it when it crashed. Right? It takes a lot of emotional management to hodl long term, and then I got more burnt with altcoins, which caused me to feel more comfortable just liquidating it all, right? Because it's like, I've got burnt here, I'm just going to liquidate everything. And then I said, yes, the altcoins are more of a gamble rather than strategic investment, in my opinion. Hard to get right unless you're really educated, like what you're doing, Mark, right? Whereas what Adam said last week is sometimes it's just a gamble if you're not putting in the time and the effort. And he goes, agree. I just had too much easy money coming in, right, from COVID, and started to gamble thinking I knew what I was doing. Lessons learned. And this is what happens when you have, and the difference is when $1 million drops on you and you go, you've just won $1 million and you haven't earned it, you don't respect it. If it's earned $1 million and you've saved it, or you've manufactured growth and you've taken on risk over 5 years, like you did, and sold all these 14 properties, and you go, I've now got $1 million here, but it's taken me fucking 10 years to accumulate it. You're going to be a lot more strategic rather than going, I just got $1 million given to me. All right, let me throw it around a little bit. And that's...
I'm speaking, Eric, Frank, like with this chunk of change coming, I'm obviously spending a lot of time really deep in thinking about this. And this is having owned real estate now for many, many years. And I go, all right, if I take this money, I know probably mathematically if I levered it up, let's say,
that's the key though, is the leverage.
You have to have leverage. If you're buying property without leverage, there's no contest.
Yeah.
So it's 7.5%, don't bother, and you have to put up with all the shit comes with it.
I agree.
But even with leverage, if you take that $1 million and you borrow 80%, you buy $5 million worth of real estate and it doubles to 10, you got to deal with the tenants for all that time. You got to face the exit cost of the stamp duties going in, you got the exit costs going out with the realtors, then you got your same tax treatment as if you sold the Bitcoin at the end, but you don't have to deal with all the shit along the way. And you aren't living with $4 million of debt every day with a bank up your ass, if things go south, right? So, but I guess what I'm saying is, for me, having had all of that real estate, I really am now cautious about, do I go back in and buy more real estate and have that journey, or do I just manage my emotions? But I guess the helpful thing, even if you don't buy Bitcoin, and this is the helpful thing, is that in your head, if you go, I'm just not comfortable with the risk, but I do realize that if I'm not going to outpace 30% a year, then I'm losing money on the Bitcoin bet. So if you're going to go into real estate, that's when you go into it. Like James is saying, you go in there with a new sense of going, I decided to go into real estate instead of Bitcoin. So this project, I have to turn this money over at 30% or better to keep up with just doing nothing. And that alone is a really great gift that Bitcoin can give people.
I think that is why starting with Bitcoin is probably a gift as well, because when you go down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, you realize that it isn't just this magic internet money, that it is macro. You can't separate Bitcoin from macro. It is macro. The reason that it was birthed into existence is because of the intertwining dynamics of global macro politics, debt, governments, flow of funds, inflation. It was born out of all these things that are macro. And so the beautiful gift that Bitcoin gives you is that it brings you on an education around all these things: energy, peace, like it touches everything. And so the education that it gives you is very macro. And that's why, starting with Bitcoin is the best way to learn macro.
It is, because, I didn't know before Bitcoin how much is the total value of assets in the world, and how much of it's in property, how much of it's in bonds, how much of it's in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin teaches you that. It teaches and it teaches you free speech. It teaches you censorship. It teaches you all kinds of things you don't expect to learn. So I really think those interested in money, that and macro is a really great place to start.
If you said to me, if the question was if there was only one thing in the world that you can study and you couldn't study anything else, you couldn't start a marketing business, you can only study one thing, I would say Bitcoin. That would be the one thing that I'd put my effort in studying.
And there's one great resource at Sailors. What's it called?
Hope.com.
Hope.com. You can go and find it all in one spot.
With Michael Saylor talking a lot about it. So look, just pointing people down those roads, and this is coming from years of owning all kinds of assets. And like, again, just touching on that Cbus story, every news story I hear pretty much now, I think about it in that context. Like that Cbus story, I read it in New Zealand, how that super fund is being investigated by ASIC right now. That's scary stuff when you've got all these tradies whose superannuation is being stored in super funds. We all know super funds don't return a lot of money, but at least they should return safety, right? They should be stable. And when you're talking about $3 trillion of Australian workers' funds in there, that's counterparty risk, right? Where in a company at the highest level, there are these people in the executive suite that are trade union members.
That's why.
That's scary, right? And that's another reason why with Bitcoin, you don't have that counterparty risk.
That's why I've never been a big superannuation guy myself.
Correct. Yeah, because you don't understand. There's so many ways, that they can go down. So the last thing I want to close on today was in the podcast that the Zoom I did last week, which was kind of like my swan song gift to everyone who's been following me all these years. I tried to put into, an hour and a half, everything that I have learned in that time, particularly about creating wealth and money. And I talked about Bitcoin for quite a while in that at the end, for 20 minutes or 15 minutes. But one of the things I said is that we are moving to Cyprus in March, and I got so many messages going, oh my God, why are you doing that? Why did you choose Cyprus and all of that? So I thought it might be fun for you guys to ask me questions about why we're moving to Cyprus.
Yeah. Where do you start? Basically, the dynamics of why you chose Cyprus over other areas would be great to understand.
Yeah, so I think a bit of a macro view is, like I'm going into a period of my life now where I become more of a capital allocator, and which is I don't really want to run businesses anymore, and I haven't done for a little while now. So I'm in the business of running money, right, growing money, and one of the biggest line items, or the biggest line item, is obviously taxation, when you get wealthier, right? And so we Cass and I got to a point, I think middle of last year, where I just got home one day and I said, are you happy? And she's like, oh, not really. Like, I'm happy with you and I'm happy with Josh and our family life, but I'm not overtly happy. And we had this beautiful home and, we live in the Gold Coast, which is beautiful, but there was something inside of us that was just like, we just feel like we're not living like an adventurous life. We're not, like you get married, you don't have that going out partying and doing all that stuff's gone. It's sort of like you have to,
such a relevant conversation.
and I'm just being honest, like that's where we were. And I had the Porsche in the garage or the Ferrari or whatever it was and the nice everything. And I said, I'm not feeling the juice, and we that started a whole bunch of conversations. There's a lot of honesty around that. And eventually I came home after a long walk one day. I said, what if we sold up and left? And just went on an adventure. And then you go, okay, well, where would you live? Where would we want to live? And so we just whiteboard basically, like, what are all the things that would be great? And life is not just about tax, right? You don't make a decision to move somewhere like living in a Caribbean island. You go, oh yeah, I'm paying no tax, but you're bored as hell. This thing called island fever, right? So you can't just do that. So we looked around. We said, all right, well, it would be nice to live somewhere that's tax efficient, right? And then we started learning about the types of places that were on a short list. We spoke to Nomad Capitalists. We spoke to all these advisors. And we went to Cyprus, first of all, because tax is obviously very effective there, which I can talk about if you'd like to ask questions there. But it's a beautiful place. It's a Mediterranean island. There's loads of expats there. It's big enough that there's great infrastructure, good healthcare. You can ski in the winter. The beaches are stunning in the summer or year round. It's really close to Europe where we want to spend a lot more time. It's not like Dubai where you're going to always feel like an outsider. You step out the door and you're breathing sand and it's cripplingly hot. You can go for a walk, all that sort of stuff. And the diet's great and the hospitals are great and all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, tax is really effective. So, 15% corporate tax. If you're a tech company, there's ways to get that down to 1.5%. No tax on dividends. So you can run all the money through your company, pull out as dividends, pay your corporate tax, you're done. The big draw, one of the biggest draws was there's a non-dom program, which means non-domiciled. So you only need to be there, if you're structured correctly, up to 60 days a year. So you got to be there 60 days a year, can't be anywhere else for 183 or more, which would make you a tax resident of that other place. And so that gives you a great deal of flexibility to have a base in Cyprus and live an international life. And of course you can't, if you have assets in Australia, like you're generating money off real estate or you buy and then you sell properties while you're away, you're going to pay tax in Australia. There's no avoiding that. So it's not suited for, I'm just going to set up a company in Cyprus, spend 60 days a year there and the rest in Australia can't do it. So that's a sort of high level.
So effectively, if anyone's thinking about doing it, the assets that they decide to keep in Australia, they continue to pay tax on in Australia. If they sell all their assets in Australia, they've got to pay the capital gains tax or whatever it is relevant.
And if you sell after you move, like we're selling up in our financial year, we'll pay tax on all the assets that we sell at Australian tax rates, fair and square, pay the exit tax, and then we're out after that, and we won't have any real estate in Australia.
And then if you reinvest those funds and earn dividends, it's tax-free in Cyprus.
Yeah. So just to be clear, if you leave afterwards, it's pure. Like if you leave afterwards, then you start taking rental income from Australian properties. Just sell Australian properties afterwards. The taxes are really high in Australia.
Yeah, and so just with that, the non-domicile dividends, that's for companies that are registered in Cyprus and produce dividends. Not if you had companies in the US that are producing dividends. It's only if they're Cyprian-based companies.
If you're a Cyprus company, yeah. But of course, your Cyprus company could. You have a contract with your Australian business that's fair and commercial. If you're doing work and funds could be tendered there legally.
And so just I know the answer to this, but it could be quite interesting that you're open about it on the pod about doing first mortgage lending. You're going to continue doing that in Australia. And just explain the structure of that and how that works from a tax perspective on interest-based royalties, if you will.
Yeah, so we make a lot of money from lending money. And so tax, if you're a Dubai citizen and you lend money in Australia, tax on interest on interest received is taxed 10% domestically in Australia. So you pay the ATO the 10%, And that's the end of it.
That's if the money comes from an Australian-based entity that you're performing the first mortgage lending through, and whether you've got a proprietary limit here or not, or in Dubai, that this HO wants to take their 10%.
Yeah, the HO will take their 10%. Usually, like I do first mortgage lending through a fund in Melbourne, they will retain, I get paid monthly, they take their 10%.
Yeah.
And tender it straight to the ATO. And as a non-Australian, because I won't have a home here, I won't have a car here, I won't have anything in Australia, I won't be here.
And that money, that's the balance of 90% will then get transferred into a Cyprian-based bank account or an Australian-based
into my Australian NAB account,
yeah.
And then I pay tax wherever I am a citizen.
Got it. And that NAB account is in what sort of structure? It's not Adam Hudson, it'll be something proprietary limited as a trustee for a trust, or what's that just look like?
You need to talk to your accountant about that.
Yeah.
No. So are you still
But
paying?
from the ATO's point of view, that that would be if it's held in an Australian company, it would be an Australian company that's receiving it, right? So you'd need.
So how much tax are you paying in Cyprus on that money? You're paying 10% already off the top.
You pay whatever the tax rate is in Cyprus.
Whatever the tax rate is.
Corporate rate is, yeah. For your situation.
Well, whatever you're in Cyprus, you don't get taxed on dividends, and you don't get taxed on interest.
Or on interest.
Yeah, right. Can I? Because I found the intro part of this conversation fascinating, and I'm having so many discussions with people at the moment. You know, my sister who's coming on the pod tomorrow built a house, renovated, got the 2 kids, and it's like, Mark, did you kind of feel underwhelmed when you achieved all that for the first time? And I'm like, my story is different, but everyone is. I don't know if it's COVID, I don't know if it's just the world and the way it's going, but I think everyone is going through that that reckoning or that realization that maybe there's something more to life or to experiencing joy. So my question for you would be, ideally, because we don't know how it'll turn out, but ideally, how do you want to allocate your time, which is your most important resource? Is it there's a business idea? Is it just allocating capital? Is it traveling? How do you and Cass want to spend your time?
So next year, we've mapped it all out. I'm 4 months in Cyprus, 3 months in New York, and I think 1 month in Bali with the charity trips, and then maybe 8 weeks in Australia from a geolocation point of view. And then we have about another 2 months of just trips in Europe with friends. So we've got like 8 weeks of like touring. You know, we start in Florence, we're going on we're spending a month there. And then, so we're hopping around for like 2 months just in Europe, just exploring outside of that. So that's the time. But in terms of
Day to day,
I'm going to run the new e-commerce brand that we're launching, which I haven't announced yet, but that's going to be happening. And that I'm doing in partnership with a friend in Perth. So that'll probably take 2-3 hours a day. And then I'll sort of mentor the investee companies that we have back home, see how they turn out, over the long term. And I may, probably not next year, but the year after, I may get more into Bitcoin. And in terms of like education, and we might start an Unemployable Bitcoin event or an Unemployable Bitcoin channel. Who knows? But I'm really passionate about that. But I don't know whether I want to get into that right away. But initially, I really want to try and learn to live a fulfilled life that doesn't have business at the heart of it, and that's going to be a really big challenge for me. Because I'm so addicted to it that I'd really like. So I've been learning a language now for a few months. I'm just going to see if I can make that transition. It's not going to be easy. No, I've been learning French, but if you're in Cyprus for 3 years and you learn Greek, you can get a Cyprus passport and become a citizen of Cyprus after 3 years, which is another huge plus because it gives you access to the Kangan area, so all of the European countries outside of the UK.
I love how they actually put a means test on. You actually have to do a test to learn the language, unlike Australia.
Yeah, totally.
I'm deadly serious.
You have to learn Greek if you want to get the Cypriot thing. And the other thing is you have to have a permanent residence in Cyprus. So you either have to buy a place or have a legit lease. And for the people, a lot of people ask me, how do you do it? I've got a law firm referred to me. It's 10,000 euro for me and my partner. And if we have kids, they can come in as well as Cypriot residents. So 10,000 euro covers company and corporation, bank account, visas, the whole lot. And the really interesting thing about the healthcare system is they have this tax that's, I think it's 2.5% of your income, but it stops at 4,000 euro or 3,000 euro. And once you've paid that, then you get access to the healthcare system.
Wow.
Totally. So it's capped. Not like in Australia where they just tax you and tax you. And I look, frankly, I am reading the tea leaves. I don't want to shit on Australia too much, but I'm looking more and more at the country, and I don't like what I see in a lot of ways. I don't like what I see with employment law. You know, they've just announced on the weekend or late last week, menopausal leave is something that they're working on now. So women get menopause leave, domestic violence leave. I'm like, it's all great in theory. Nobody would argue that domestic violence is terrible and menopause is a real thing, but it's the small business person who's just got the kids and trying to get ahead in life that have to pay for all of that. And they're just getting absolutely decimated. Like the risk of opening a small business in this country and the expense and the stress is just getting harder and harder and harder for Aussie entrepreneurs and small business people as every day goes past. And so and the free speech stuff is really pissing me off. And
that's
I'm getting really sick of that. I'm like, there's a big world out there, and we're all going to be dead in a minute. Make sure you know.
There's nothing that inspires me more than hearing these stories. Like I'm getting the juice just listening to you tell the story of why you're doing it, how you're doing it. And there's this couple that I used to follow, Sailing La Vagabond, who are basically sailing around the world in there. And they've built a YouTube channel, and, you know, there's people on X that are making money, shit posting trade setups. And it's like, the more and more I hear these stories, the more and more it's shaping the direction that I want to take my life as well.
It is scary. Like, these are big decisions. Like, I signed 2 contracts last week to sell, you know, roughly $13 million worth of real estate, right? So it's a big chunk of change to pull the trigger on. And that money all comes in a few months, and you go, well, fuck. What am I going to do with the money? Because there's no debt really there. It's just, what do you do with that level of cash? And so that's why I'm spending so much time in this space.
When Mark said earlier, you know, the feeling that he gets, and I'm not sure why, and you nailed it there. It's the phone. It's social media that's created influence amongst ourselves. Because think about like our parents' era. They didn't know who was doing what at what time other than a phone call. They didn't see anyone, right? Like, I can go and post, like when we do, and we go to Europe, or, you know, people go on trips, and you go, oh, wow, that inspires people, right? They look at that and they go, wow, I want to do that. I look at talking to this guy from Bali at the moment, him and his girlfriend, he's in Spain. I'm on Zoom call with him. He's building villas and luxury hotels in Bali. They're influencers. They're beautiful people, traveling the world, making money. I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Then I talk to another person, or my wife sends me something else, you know, like those people that are doing those tours in Florence and Italy, you know, this older couple.
We're hanging out with them.
Yeah, you're hanging out with them, right? Like, I'm like, amazing. Like, these guys literally have created a business, right? Doing tours around Europe and in Italy and making money. And I'm just like, this is amazing. We didn't see that stuff. Like, growing up, I didn't see that.
They were chiropractors in California, and they just said, we're done with American life. And they said, we always wanted to go to Florence. Yeah. And so they moved to Florence, and now they run high-end food and wine tours. And it's like $15,000 a week to go. And we're doing it, and we're going to going to these cheese factories and things. And it's really, like, I think, really important that you take a step back and have a real think about, like, what really brings you joy in life. And to be happy in that. We've traveled a lot now, and Cass and I are getting really, really granular about where our joy is. And at the very base, they said, what's one of the most important things to you? And I said, walking. And they're like, what? Like, walking and food. Like, the place has to have good food, and where we live has to be walkable. Like, we've had the beautiful multi-million-dollar properties and all that, but the thing is, it's got to be walkable, and a view. Also, a view is important. Not the view. The view we got now is ridiculous, but just a good view, you know, like a nice view. And like, walking time for us is where we bond and we exercise.
Interesting.
All at once. And so when we're looking at Limassol, which is the city we're moving to, we're like, all right, what area is the most walkable? Now, when we're younger, we're like, what's the most fuck off awesome pad you can get?
Yeah.
But as you get
Well, nightlife.
Yeah. You're like, no, what's walkable? What's around there? What's the food like? Like, we go to Google Maps and we put in vegetarian and vegan, because Cass has, you know, got a lot of eating stuff. So, and when we saw that, boom, pins everywhere. Like, there's a shitload. And the other thing is Pilates. Cass loves her Pilates. So when you start building your life around these really basic tenets, you're actually really designing a life. And for me, I need a place to work. So I'm like, I don't want to work at home. So I know from day one, I'm going to get a co-working space in Limassol somewhere. We're going to join a gym straight away, and we're going to be in a walkable area. And we know where the vegetarian restaurants are, even though she eats fish.
Yeah.
But we know that she can get gluten-free, dairy-free. She's not going to be like constantly agitated and frustrated every time we sit down for a meal.
And more and more of these satellite locations are popping up due to the power of the internet and connectivity. Like, we can talk about the negatives all day, but some of the positives are that you can find your tribe. But, in Ibiza, there's people that are doing similar retreats where you can go and stay for 3 months. You can work there, and there's community of people that are all like e-com people or whatever. Like, these communities are these satellite places are popping up all over the world through the power of connectivity and
there are whole Bitcoin cities and there's.
And
you're going to say something?
Oh, it's sort of along the lines of what Mark was saying. It's just so accessible, so marketed now that it's becoming the norm. It's not this like crazy concept.
Yeah, like traveling east, like the Vikings were going to travel east. Like, it was such a, you're crazy, but
it's thinking outside the box. Like, when we sat down and like the thought 2 years ago of me selling my home was like off the table, because I love my home. You guys have all been there. It's beautiful, but we've changed. And as people, we've changed, and we're like, okay, we've got this huge amount of cash just sitting there costing us money. It's actually costing us to have it. What if we invested that and then we just did these other things? And I just like what we like, it's not to brag, but we get quite a bit of an interest. You guys know because you're my mates, but what I will be saving in my tax just off the one distribution I get a month from one fund will pay for any apartment anywhere in the world, including
except for New York,
almost New York. But just the tax bill on that's 25 grand a month off that one source. And you go, okay, well, if I just move over here, then the ATO basically pays for my.
But you've also got the flexibility to come back. If you're here for 8 weeks a year, probably the best time to come is in spring and autumn. So and you come back and see your mates and do what you do anyway. So,
but it's funny, we're building a little tiny house on Josh's place, our sons, and little tiny house, and we're happy. Cass just wants to know she can be home and be near her son and the dog within 24 hours. That's it. And it's just being open to different ways of living. And
it's ironic that liquidating all your assets and taking a step back from various different things can be one of the most liberating things. Like, I just sense this feeling of liberation as I hear you
super alive
speaking about it.
I'm going to get a tax bill, but I'm like, there are worse things in life. Like, I feel like I'm literally dying at the moment because I just waking up every day and I've got this beautiful prison, but my soul has already left the building. Like, I want to, I rang James and I was in Paris last time. I remember ringing you and I was walking around the streets of Paris and he goes, what are you up to? I said, dude, I've just had the most awesome pastry. There's flowers on the street.
It's in a photo of it. It's just like the pristine.
Yeah,
just exactly like the magazine.
I said, I don't really know where I am, but I'm in the back streets of Paris somewhere, and I feel the most alive I've felt in ages. And so we it's just little things like that. Getting a play, and we just now know how to search for the right type of property. What things you need to immediately do when you get there, like to make sure that you don't just eat in restaurants all the time and that sort of stuff.
So with all you actually like just getting down to the nitty gritty to paint a real picture, like you've got some fantastic art, you've got some fantastic furniture at home, not from fantastic furniture, so this is, you got a couple of cars, you're selling it all? Inclusive, or you're going to
the art wheel store, because that's taken us quite a while to put all that together. So, and you can't really, the type of art we have, there's not really a resale. It's not expensive enough that it's like a Monet or something. It's expensive. It's probably 300 grand worth of art, but it's not the type of stuff you can just sort of sell. So what you get for it, you're better off just storing it. The car, like, I love the car, but I'll just sell. I can always buy another car. So getting rid of the cars.
How about the furniture?
What's that?
I need furniture for the new place.
No, and Adam's got a massive dining table. I don't think he's going to.
That's an awesome dining table.
It's probably won't fill your space. So
do you a good deal. But even with us,
it is very hard to get out of life in Australia. It's a huge gravity, but as you offload these things and you start getting down to the nitty gritty of phone contracts and all the shit that you lease and all the stand contract, you're getting rid of all that shit.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how fucking good it feels.
The happiest Dom and I ever were probably the 8 months when we packed all our shit into a storage cage and come up to Broadbeach in just what I could fit in the car.
How good.
Yeah, it's even like with us, Jen loves traveling, right? And she's a bit of a gypsy herself. Like, if I said, hey babe, let's go to Cyprus, or let's go to Dubai, or let's go, like, she's down. She's waiting on me.
Yeah, we'll see you next year.
Right? She's a spontaneous one, right? And it's just it's just so interesting. Like people are going, oh, your house is going to be so good. Like I'm so non-emotional about this house. Like to me, it's so transactional. Even with her, she's like, yes, it's fun picking, but it's not our forever home. People, oh, you don't even know once you're there, you're not gonna want to leave, and
I'll know in 12 months when I get a tax bill.
then but it's the only tax incentive we have in this country.
There's no such thing as a forever home for us. Like we can't see any home being a forever home.
I hate those words forever. All that is like what you've been educated to do as a kid is go to school, get a job, buy a forever home, and pay your mortgage for 25 fucking years. Like my parents did, and their parents. Like it is the biggest fucking fugazi, right? Absolutely. That I have ever seen. Like to me, being mobile, like seeing you guys in New York, unbelievable. You know, seeing you guys in Suffolk Park as an example. Coming from, I love seeing that. I love seeing. With us, it's a little bit different because we have kids. People go, oh, you took your kids out of school for 2 weeks to go to Europe for 5. I don't give a shit, man. I'm never going to get this time back ever again.
And they're probably more.
And the education they're getting from, like I've got friends that their kids are in school. They will not let you. Yeah, right? Totally. Proper private school, Sydney, $100,000 a year it costs, right? They will not let you take your kid out of school for a week to go on.
Yeah, do it here.
Yeah, like proper, right?
Honestly, and all this ownership stuff, like I look at James and I look where James is, and he's got a rock star view right in the middle of Burleigh Heads. He can walk out with a few months' notice and it'll cost him no more than a few grand maybe. He could re-rent that apartment if he had to break his lease in 5 seconds for more money. Like he's got the absolute freedom, but sometimes you got to go that full circle of like acquiring all the shit to realize none of it means nothing.
I get the principal place of residence and tax-free bit, but there's a very wealthy guy that we all know, and one of the very first things he said to me was, "Is rent your lifestyle and buying investment." Correct. Full stop. So obviously never. I've owned my own home before and all that sort of stuff, but it's not a big thing on my radar to go out and dump a whole heap of cash into something that I can't double in a short period of time.
Very smart.
And I'm like Eric. Both the homes that I bought that we'll be living between. I looked at them transactionally.
Yeah, same like that. But most people are just,
especially Aussies. Like we coach some people, and they're like, they share their financials, and they say, "What would you do?" And I see them sitting on like a huge tranche of equity in their home that they could rent for $1,000, even $1,500 a week. I said, "You realize if you put this money to work, if you're seriously wanting to get rich, what are you, like Grant says, what are you prepared to give up to get what you want?" And they're not prepared to give up that family home. It's just so ingrained in people's brains. Like, get a good job. Well, it used to be get a trade, so you get a good job. Work for the government, so you've always got a security. Yeah, well, that's not the way
we come back to the be, do, have, right? And since I started my entrepreneurial journey and went down the rabbit holes of finance, etc., I had to relearn how to be. Like effectively, when you make these kind of changes, you have to spend a lot of time on yourself, not just the external macro world. You have to spend a lot of time on yourself relearning how to be in order to take those handcuffs off. Otherwise, it's
that are around your brain.
It's just too hard. It's just too hard to do in an instant because you heard it on a podcast. Sometimes you just have to relearn the whole thing.
Yeah,
and it
starts within. It starts with confidence, right? And going against the grain of what we've been taught our entire lives. Like when I told my parents that I'm moving to Australia, that I'm coming to Australia, not moving here. We're coming for 18 months. It was a big deal. Like my mom was like, "Oh my God, what happens if you don't come back?" And we didn't come back, right? And I know it breaks her heart every fucking day, right? But the thing is, I can't picture myself in that same city that I grew up with, living within that same 2-kilometer radius in this bubble. Like I get stressed thinking about it, but what happens is you come here. Yes, it's a beautiful place. Yes, it's amazing, but it's still not everything, like the freedom, right? Is the freedom, the time freedom. And Brooke says it, right? It's time freedom and location freedom. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't have is a location freedom, right? Because a lot of us, if you have a job and you have to be physically there, you have to be physically there. But now there's so many people working remotely, right? Like you look at your sister as an example. And that's what's changing the game. The jobs the opportunities that you have now weren't around back then. You couldn't have a satellite digital agency back in 1990. You know what I mean? Like you're working at Toyota manufacturing, building cars. Like that's what you're doing because there was no other other opportunities to give you that freedom, which now there's so many options. So what I recommend people thinking is, if you're looking to get into business or you're looking to get into investment or whatever, is what actually makes your wheel spin, right? What makes you happy, and build your life around that. And if it's traveling, like me, it's non-negotiable going away every year. Non-negotiable. I don't care what I have to put in place. I don't care if I have to bring another partner in on a bit. I don't care. That is a non-negotiable for me, right? And you build your life. You build your life around that, right? And set those expectations up front. But have a very, very, very good think of what business you want to get into. Because as good as business is, and it gives you money, but at times you can feel like, you're in handcuffs.
That's just life generally. And I think, somebody said to me, the reason you feel so alive when you travel is because when you're at home, everything about your life is familiar. So you know everything. So huge parts of you just go into just maintenance mode. Like that's how people live. And then when you travel, nothing's familiar. And so everything you're heightened, and people go, I feel so alive when I'm traveling. Well, that's why. And so the problem with Western life, and I think why people loved watching Anthony Bourdain, is because he dared. Like he exposed himself. There's an Australian YouTuber, I can't think of his name. I'll figure it out. He does some amazing travel videos where he goes into like the slums of Mumbai and things like that. And there's a part of that in all of us that crave that stimulation. And so this isn't for everybody. There's young people listening to this that should have their head down, grinding 6-7 days a week, working their nuts off right now for the first 10 years, from 20 to 30 or 30 to 40 if you're there. But then I'm talking to the older people now, really. I'm not really giving this advice to young people. Go and work your balls off and do that. Or, but for older people, there's so many that are living unhappy lives that are chasing the next Porsche or the next investment property. Whereas if they just took stock of what they had, hung around some different people. And that's why I'm toying with, not next year, but maybe the year after, starting like a little freedom event, which is based around getting alternative thinkers in a room where we talk about Bitcoin, where we talk about
That's cool.
Medicinal marijuana and what else?
Ayahuasca ceremonies.
Like free,
Is he in on that?
yeah, like freedom convention, like where we talk, like we get all those types of people that are just optimizing for a free life, but with a real monetary side to it as well. Not just like a hippie where we all just drop acid and trip out.
Yeah,
I'm pretty cool with that too.
that is cool.
All right.
Keep me posted with that.
Guys, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you found that pod interesting. We'll see you on the next one. You know what to do. Like and subscribe. Hope you're finding it helpful. Bye for now.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.